Hello readers, I'm the Avid Reader and today we're reviewing The Hot War Bombs Away, written by Harry Turtledove in 2015. So this is a book by Harry Turtledove that talks about what if the Korean War during the Cold War had gone hot with nuclear weapons. So I think it was in December 1950, Douglas MacArthur suggested to Harry S. Truman to nuke China as they were sending in a lot of soldiers into the Korean War. They were kind of winning by then, the Chinese and the North Koreans. So in real life, that did not happen, and the Korean War came into a stalemate in 1953. But in this book, they use nukes, and in retaliation, the Soviet Union starts also using nuclear weapons in Europe, and then people are nuking the Soviet Union, people are nuking the United States, and it becomes a hellscape, this war. Worse than World War II, probably. So, before I continue, there will be spoilers in this review. So, as always, Harry Turtledove's books are character-driven. You could say, in a sense, that the main character is Harry S. Truman. I mean, he's the highest-ranking person in this book. And he's the President of the United States. And as I said, the Korean War is going badly. And Douglas MacArthur, the general in Asia, suggests to him that he should drop nuclear weapons. And he does, and later he has to regret it. So this book happens between December 1950 and May 1951.
You have large nuclear escalation.
So it ends up with that Harry S. Truman learns on the phone from Secretary Marshall that the Panama Canal has been nuked. And the British inform him also that the Suez Canal has been nuked. And the thing with the Korean War is that the logistics are on the side of the Chinese, as the United States is far away from this war and getting resources and things like that is hard enough. And now their main waterways, which is Panama and Suez, are gone, while China is right next to Korea, so it's easy for them to funnel in troops. And the Soviet Union is invaded Europe now, and they are making progress into West Germany, also in northern Italy, while in Korea the war comes into a stalemate. But I think after the North Koreans have captured Seoul, actually. In Korea, we get the perspective of Kate Curtis, who is an American lieutenant, and he gets caught behind the enemy lines, and he has to get back into his countrymen, and he is helped by Korean Christians, so that's an interesting scene. You get to see that you have solidarity between the small Christian minority in North Korea. And they help him get back to American lines. He basically stays there with the war in Korea becoming a stalemate and taking a backseat to the one happening in Europe. His captain gets shot, so he ends up somehow becoming a battalion commander towards the end. Then you have Daisy Baxter, so she's a pub owner in Britain and she serves drinks to a bunch of RAF and USAF men. She meets an RAF man she likes, Brooke McConaughey. It looks like there may be a relationship building between them. We will see in the next novel. Then there's also Bill Staley. He is a US pilot who is in Asia, and he participated in the bombing of Nigeria, which is where the first nuclear weapons were dropped. He then had to evacuate to Japan, and he also got orders to go and bomb the Soviet Union. So first they bombed Vladivostok, or the name of that town that's on the far edge of eastern Russia in Siberia. But now they have to bomb a couple of cities in Siberia, and before he's able to do it, his plane with nuclear weapons is shot down and he crashes and dies. So yeah, you've got a couple of characters who die in this book. Back home in the United States, you've got his wife, Marianne Staley. She's on the West Coast, if I remember correctly, and she gets to witness one of the bombings, if I remember correctly, who is nuked out of existence. So some cities on the West Coast are just gone. Maybe she's in LA, I don't remember, somewhere in the West Coast. And here she's friendly on the refugee camp with some of the Jews who actually have been in concentration camps previously in Nazi Germany. So that's an interesting contrast, since the Americans may be complaining of their conditions, but they're getting food, they're not starving. They have life pretty good, they don't even have to work. So the Jews are grateful with what they have, and she's building a friendship with these different Jews, especially Farid Tabakman. You've got the German militiaman in Germany, Gustav Rosel. So he served in the Wehrmacht previously, and now he has happily joined as a German militiaman for the United States and Britain and things like that, to help them fight the Soviets, since a lot of Germans right when World War II and that they wanted to ally themselves with the West and fight against the Soviet Union, since Germans are really anti-communist in Nazi Germany. He's not a real Nazi, but he fights with a German who's a former Waffen SS guy. So you get to see the perspective of a lot of different soldiers who you expect to come from this disgusting regime, but you get to see that a lot of these soldiers are not that bad, that they're fighting, they have no choice. But he's a militiaman, but he's fighting for the good side. And towards the end of the book, we get the perspective also of his wife, Louisa Ozel, and her German town has been taken over by the Soviets now, so now she's worried that they may rape her, but they haven't done it yet. Back in the United States, you've got the Jewish American Aaron Finch, so he's a driver, and when one of the Soviets pilots comes to nuke the United States, his plane is shot down, he lands, while Aaron Finch comes and stops him with a knife and brings him to jail. And through exploring with his truck, he has seen the nuclear damage done in one of the cities. For what he did, he is commended by the US President Harry S. Truman and gets a letter of gratitude. And we get to see some of his family things, Aaron Finch. And his wife, cousin or something like that, they are kind of sympathetic to the communist world, so that's interesting. You could say many things in this book are a critique of the communist regimes of the Soviet Union especially, so I like that. This book clearly shows the dark side of communism, so that's a good plus in this book. Then you've got Boris Gribkov, he's another pilot and he nukes Seattle and Paris towards the end of the book. That's the last thing that happens in the book. And these pilots kind of have it on their conscience, they feel bad a little bit that they have bombed these cities and killed tens of thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands, but the other side is doing it also, so it kind of feels okay for them. A funny thing in this book, kind of, in a dark way, is that the Soviets repeatedly say and say again, I serve the Soviet Union, which basically says, I'm the slave of the Soviet Union. I will do whatever they want of me. You've also got Ihor Shevenko, who works on the kolchos. Kolchos are these collective farms in the Soviet Union, and he's Ukrainian, so Ukrainian kind of hate the Soviets. However, since the Nazis were really horrible to them, they are partially thankful that they beat back the Nazis, but there are still some Ukrainian partisans, but he's just working on his kolchos, enjoying his wife, and towards the end of the book he's called in to join the Red Army, and he does so reluctantly. And repeatedly you see these people in these horrible working conditions, but they have to speak positively of the great Stalin or the great Soviet Union to stay alive, to not be taken by the MGB, which is the successor of the NKVD, I think, so the secret police. So you get to see the police state clearly in the Soviet Union in this book. In China, you've got a Russian expat called Vasily Yasevich. So after the Russian Civil War, a lot of white Russians went over to China to not get persecuted by Lenin and Stalin. Then Mao came along, so a lot of those Russians were tortured or executed. Vasily Yasevich's parents committed suicide before those red communists could. He didn't, and he's selling different drugs to these communist party officials and their wives. But when he refuses to sell opium to a high-ranking communist official, the communists come into his house, search it. He isn't there, he sees it occurring, so he leaves and goes to the Soviet Union, which the Soviet Union is also a totalitarian state, but now that you've had the nuking of different cities in the Soviet Union and China, the papers control there will be expected to be less. So he makes a deal with some fishermen to take him over the river to get to the Soviet Union in Russia. And we also get to see the perspective of a couple of Hungarian soldiers. So during World War II, Hungary served under Nazi-leaning regime, but they weren't Nazi until the last year or so. You've got this Tibor Nagy who's serving for the Hungarian People's Republic, and he has this Hungarian sergeant who has served for Hungary. He served for the Nazi-like Arrow Cross in Hungary, and now he serves for the Soviet Union. So you see some of these sergeants have no morals and just enjoy killing. And we get to see the fighting, and some of the Hungarians actually want to defect to the United States. They have nothing against the United States, and they know that they are much stronger, but he never gets the opportunity and he's shot and killed. So then we get the perspective of his Jewish Hungarian comrade, István Szalowitz, and he's a good soldier, and he has empathy for different things since he is Jewish, so he remembers persecution in Hungary. Although a lot of the Jews, luckily, they survive. And he's promoted to Lance Corporal, so things aren't horrible for him, but yeah, he's not happy to having to fight for a Soviet Union. A lot of those people are hate the Soviet Union but have to speak positively of them. They also have to fight along the same side of some Polish soldiers, as the Poles are also Soviet puppets now, but there's some enmity kind of between them, that they don't really like each other, but they have to deal with it anyways. And finally you got Konstantin Morozov, who's a Soviet tank commander, and His tank is eventually shot up, his legs are burning a little bit, he goes into the snow, he survives, he returns to duty quickly afterwards, and unfortunately for him, a Russian, he goes into a crew where all of the other ones are not Russian. So he's in a tank crew now that's, you've got him the Russian, you've got the Belarusian, then you've got an Armenian, and you've got a Latvian or Lithuanian. And the Bolts don't like Soviets or Russians. And those are all the characters in Bombs Away. So as I said, it's a character-driven book. They are not as developed as Harry Turtledove usually does, but this is, since this book is a 1/3 shorter than a usual Harry Turtledove book. But they're still pretty well developed, and they bring some interesting concepts reflecting on World War II and on communism and on nuclear warfare. So there's some good commentary in this book. How would I rate The Hot War Bombs Away? I would give it an 8 out of 10. It's a good book. It doesn't do any great thing really that makes it stand out to me, but it's still a good Harry Turtledove book. Harry Turtledove is always a good author usually, I think. It was better definitely than Joe Steele. Joe Steele had some problems. I don't think it's better than Guns of the South. Guns of the South may have made some more interesting commentary, but this book still makes some interesting commentary on different subjects, so I liked it. The Hot War Bombs Away, an 8 out of 10. So this is a small trilogy. I've got the other two books, so I may review the follow-ups to this book, and that's Fallout and Armistice. But we'll see. If you want to learn about what would have happened if the Cold War turned into nuclear warfare early in the 50s, you can read this book. And the world doesn't die. I mean, if this had happened in the 60s, the world would be over, but nuclear weapons aren't powerful enough to destroy the world. But they are still pretty powerful to screw it up. An interesting book. 8 out of 10. Good read. This was the Avid Reader's review in the first volume in the Hot War trilogy called Bombs Away. It was written by Harry Turtledove in 2015. It got an 8 out of 10. I hope you readers enjoyed this book review, and I will see you readers next time.